What's going on, NDM crew? Welcome back to another video. Today we got something new. Oh yeah. So I picked up a quad. Figured we can have some fun with this for sure. That way I'm entering a different realm that I'm used to. A couple of my buddies have quads, so they've been kind of pushing me for a while to get one. So we finally got one. We'll dive in to exactly what this is and how big of a piece of shit this is. You know me, I always over exaggerate that the Datsun's a piece of shit, but that's all jokes. This is truly a piece of shit. A big piece of garbage that we'll talk about right now. Alright guys, so I picked up this 2003 Yamaha Banshee. These things have a reputation for being stupid fast. They're two-stroke, so you got that sweet two-stroke power band, but this thing is seriously in rough shape. We'll go over a few things, but right now, today I want to diagnose what's going on with it and why ultimately I can't get this thing started. Realistically, it can only be one of two things. Either it's something that requires a buttload of work, or something that is a little bit more simple and can be fixed hopefully relatively easily. So let's just dive in. We'll do a walk around of the quad really quick, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, so like I mentioned, this thing is in pretty rough shape. Again, it's a 2003 Yamaha Banshee. The plastics are kind of worn, but I'm not really too worried about that. As you can see here, I got the case taken off, just trying to figure out what's going on with this thing, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But just the overall shape, the thing is pretty beat. Realistically, the only reason why I bought it was because it was supposed to be like halfway through a rebuild on this thing, meaning that the motor had been completely rebuilt, at least a top end rebuild, and then the transmission had been completely refreshed with everything pretty much new. So it's more of everything else that kind of around the bike that is kind of messed up and beat. Definitely needs new wheels and tires. The brakes work, but need a little bit of love. I know this back bar is not factory, needs to be, or it's just like something that's been welded together. So I don't know how much of the frame has been welded together, kind of bush league. This pedal assembly here, or this footrest here, definitely has been welded down here. So there's a few little things that we need to freshen up on this thing for sure, just to get it where I want it to be for this year, and then over the winter hopefully we'll do some things. Ultimately everything was painted black, so as you can see, the shocks here were originally white, painted black. Like everything was kind of, I think, just dressed up to look better than it is before I bought it. Obviously I kind of looked past that. I just wanted something that wasn't going to need a rebuild right away. But that being said, we may actually need to do a rebuild depending on how what we figure out by the end of this video. As you can see here, this case has been snapped off. So ultimately there was an issue with the chain coming off. It broke the case. There was no case saver on this installed on the quad, on the bike, so it actually broke the case. It didn't do too much damage, it's just there's no more mounting spot for this. So if I got a new cover, couldn't really do too much with it unless I make some brackets or something to make it work, which I may do. We'll see what I decide to do here. But ultimately I just wanted, like I said, something that was decent, had the platform that I could build off of. I'm very fresh and very new to quad, so I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but it's a learning process for me, and hopefully you guys can learn from it too. This is pretty much it I know there's probably a lot of things that I'm missing to say, but this is just a quick walk around of the quad, and we'll actually start diving into work right away while I explain what actually happened with this thing. Alright guys, so I bought a running driving quad. So earlier in the video I mentioned that the thing isn't running, and we're going to try and get it running by the end of this video, or figure out why it's not running. So ultimately I got 2 rips with this thing, and something bad happened. Ultimately I went to go fire it up, and the Kickstarter locked up completely on me. So that can mean a couple things. The most common is that the engine is seized. Now, me thinking about it didn't really make any sense, considering it seemed, well, the ad said that it was completely rebuilt with the top end. Again, it could be something related to the bottom end too that caused some issues. But ultimately the guy provided me with the old pistons, the old parts, things like that. Same goes with the transmission. They actually put all new gears in. There was an issue with one gear that they had, and they ended up replacing everything. I think ultimately what happened was it got a little bit too crazy with too expensive to build for what the person was doing. So they kind of did the motor and transmission, and then they kind of just bailed on everything else and decided to just get rid of it. So ultimately, I didn't think that the motor could be seized, and I had a few instances where I was able to actually crank over the motor after it kind of locked up initially. So I'm not thinking that the motor is pooched, is gone, is garbage. So we'll have to see, but that still could very well be a possibility. Ultimately, there could be something that got jammed on either side. Something came loose or something broke, whether it be a tooth of some sort or whatever, that is jammed somewhere, not allowing me to turn over the flywheel. So we'll have to kind of dive deeper and dig into it. So the other side, as you saw as I was doing the walk around, the case is off. So I took that apart. Everything seems to be okay there, but we're going to start actually with the stator side here to figure out maybe if something came loose. A bolt came loose and is wedged between the stator and the flywheel on this side, maybe preventing it from cranking over. So that's what we're going to do here first, and then we'll go from there. It should be a fun ride. Hopefully it's something on this side. If not, we'll have to dig a little bit deeper. I did take the spark plugs off. I don't think they're loose here, and they didn't seem to be. I know you can kind of see like little like specks of metal and things like that on the spark plug if it is seized, or if it did kind of blow up per se, and everything seemed to be okay. So we're just gonna dive a little bit deeper, take some things apart. It is gonna need a freshen up, so I bought a bunch of things that we may install today just to kind of freshen up the quad. And then again, it depends on what's happening with it. If the motor and tranny or the case needs to come out of it, then that's a whole different story. We'll get into it in another video. But we'll see what we can find, and then we'll go from there. I'll take you guys along with us. On this side, I can actually turn the motor over. So this is one side of the crankshaft. The other side of the crankshaft goes to the other side on the flywheel. So it's weird now how I can actually turn this over. Alright guys, after digging a little bit deeper, I don't know if you guys can see this, but inside here there's a lot of shavings, little chunk of metal in here. So I'm assuming something on this side is causing our issue. That was easy. Perfect. Alright, we had to crack it loose with the long bar. I was worried that it was going to break the crank. Oh yeah, something's not right in here. And we found our issue. Let me take this off here because this is insane. Look at this disaster. Oh my God. These bolts came right loose. And then jammed in the actual, jammed the motor from cranking over, so it's not. Pistons like these should technically be Loctited, and there's no Loctite on them, so that's kind of why they back themselves off. There's a lot of vibration going through this case. So let's see if I can get this other one off up here. I'll have to order a new stator, and then go from there. Shit, no Loctite on these either. Not a good sign. All this stuff should be Loctited. Actually, I'm just gonna pull the wiring harness out, and then that whole thing will come right out. Alright guys, I don't know if you can see this, but these bolts here are the bolts that work themselves out. They actually broke this little bracket here for the timing. So we're gonna have to order a new one of these. We'll order a new stator as well. The flywheel looks good, so we're not gonna have to replace that. We're just gonna clean it up. I might get another flywheel key just because it's always good to make sure that they're not worn out so you don't have any issues there. So I'm just gonna have to order a few parts, and then we'll come and revisit this once everything's back together, or once the parts come in rather, so we can put everything back together. Alright guys, today was a success, even though it's gonna mean spending a little bit more money and getting some parts for this thing, but it could have been a lot worse. We could have had to dive in a lot deeper and spend a lot more time trying to get this thing back up and running. So I do have a bunch of parts to freshen things up like I mentioned earlier. You'll see that in the next video where we're gonna do a full tune-up refresh on this thing, get it back to running perfect. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy, crew.